and then I'll be in
Copacabana,
Lima and Cusco for 4.
Nice.
So yeah, so it should be good.
cool.
I'm halfway through my typhoid right now, so
Gosh.
no. It turns out that insurance companies do not like giving typhoid vaccines for whatever reason. So it's been quite a battle.
Really?
Interesting.
Do you know why?
Probably just travel stuff.
Hmm.
I mean, they covered it, but it took a while. So
yeah.
No, but the Fla-Flu match between Flamengo and Fluminense got moved to June 23rd, so I'm going to miss that. But I think that's because Fluminense is hosting a Serie A match on the 15th, so I assume it has something to do with their incredibly confusing state tournaments that they have going on all the time. That it just they kicked around a bunch of stuff. Or Botafogo is hosting same time, so it might be the same thing where they just kicked it because Botafogo is, I don't know. But I'll be there. It actually makes tickets easier to get and
right,
all that.
We're gonna miss you here, man.
I'll still be listening in and actually
still having internet access while you're down there.
I should, but
good.
I meant to get some stickers from you guys so I could hand them out down there, but
shoot, yeah. Even if you like stuck it somewhere really obvious, that'd be really cool.
Are you going to be at the game on Saturday?
No, I will be Saturday. I will be watching from a lounge in O'Hare, unfortunately. If Chicago actually has TV, I'm not sure if they're that advanced yet.
Oh, man.
Fair.
Yeah, I just noticed the title. I like it.
Yeah, there's too many other uses of the chopping thing. You know, ball watching had that. City put theirs out, and I'm like, that's overplayed. I got to think of something. Like, what happens if you grind them up? Like, what happens? I came up with mulch, something I need to go lay outside of my house.
Yeah, dude. My gardens are awful. Cool. Well, you guys ready?
I'm sure everybody's loving our chit chat, but I am more than ready to get into this one.
I kind of snuck hitting go live on you guys. I wasn't sure you saw it.
I saw it because I got the alert on my phone, and I'm like, oh, snap. I guess we're live.
It occurred to me I could turn on the City 2 game here, so I'm kind of stalling a little bit. Oh,
I didn't think about that.
So for the, I guess, wind down for a minute or two, Matt, you got to tell me why Melbourne victory, but we'll get there.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I just wanted to start a rivalry with our new center back right away.
It's their rival, isn't it? I feel like he said it in one of his interviews.
Was the Victory? I know Victory and City are rivals.
Yeah, Melbourne City, Western Sydney Wanderers, I think, are Sydney FC's big rivals.
Oh, okay. Not Melbourne. Melbourne.
Melbourne. Oh man.
I won't attempt an Australian accent. I showed Allison, I did that tweet that was his signing by the numbers. And at the end, I put, each line started with a number, and I put 0 worries, mate, at the end. And Allison hated me for it, and that made me enjoy it even more. I enjoy cheesiness.
I try to drop all kinds of Aussieisms because of Bluey.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. My kids hate it too.
It makes you want it even more, right?
Absolutely.
All right, here we go, boys. Let's do this. Welcome, everyone, to Flyover Footy on the Big 550 KTRS. We are presented by Noble Ice Vineyards. Thank you for joining us, everyone. I have a full house tonight. Once again, we've been on a pretty good roll here, other than Matt being absent all of last week, I guess. Matt, you're back. I'm so glad you're back. Thank you for joining us tonight after a nice trip. Did you enjoy yourself? Did you get to relax a little bit?
I did. I'm so excited to be back. And by about Sunday morning, because I was at a wedding on Saturday night, and so I had plenty to occupy my mind. But by Sunday morning, I was already missing Flyover and Fallout and talking about City, because I took a heck of a time to take a week-long break, probably my first in a year or two, I think. And what a match last week. I was excited to listen to you guys on Flyover Fallout. I did, and it was a great show. And I started questioning my pronunciation of Kojima because of it. But I definitely enjoyed that. It was nice to be a listener for a week, but it's really exciting to be back because there's a ton to talk about this week.
Absolutely. Santiago, you and I did the Fallout, and it was a lot of fun. I've never experienced, I actually did a lot of homework for that one, and I was joking with you guys that I've never experienced someone else having to cut me off for talking too much and preparing too much. You had to do that, and I'm so thankful you did.
Yeah. I enjoyed that one, Phil. That was good, but we definitely missed Mr. Matt Baker. Matt,
Yes.
so I wanted to ask you, you didn't watch the game on Saturday? You were just following online?
I didn't have service in the
Oh.
vineyards of Sonoma, and so I got updates on specific spots in the vineyard. I found that I could get service, and so I would walk over when I could, and I saw the update on Alm. I saw the goals, and then no, I didn't get to watch the game actually until Tuesday morning.
Oh, wow.
It was devastating to my psyche.
Especially, I remember, I think you got service at some point. You checked in and you're like, what is happening in this game? I can't wait to watch it.
I found out that Apple TV's MLS Season Pass, you can download the 7-minute recaps and watch them offline, which I did over and over on the flight. But it wasn't until I landed that I actually got to watch the entire match, because it won't let you download the full match for some reason. And I was very disappointed in that.
Well, last but not least, we have Stuart Holtgren is joining us as well tonight. Stu, how's it going? You've got a big trip coming up this week.
Oh yeah, I'm heading down to Brazil next week, so that'll be fun. I'll miss the match against Portland, the win against Portland. So that's disappointing, but I think I'm bad luck to go to matches anyway, so I'm sure we'll win.
Oh, maybe so. I don't want to agree or disagree with that. So, I'd like the win, but I would also like you to be good luck for us. All right, we've got everyone here, and we have got plenty to talk about, so we better move on as quickly as we can here. Matt, why don't you get us started with player updates?
I almost feel like it's going to be lightning round for a few of these things before the Timbers preview. Player updates, it started bad and it got worse, right? With Tomas Ostrak being out for the season, and then Rasmus Alm, per I believe the Post-Dispatch, reported he's out 6 to 8 weeks with a knee injury. I think we're thinking MCL, but Bradley Carnell on Thursday said, quote, "It's a big blow for us, especially in our game model and how fluid he can be between the lines, but also getting behind the lines. Rasmus brought a certain depth to the game. Carnell talked about Alm as a crucial and likable guy in the locker room and on the field, and they mentioned there's opportunity for others. But I think the biggest thing is Jose Kojima, and we'll talk about him and what he means for the future. The only other notable player besides Ostrak and Alm to me was AZ Jackson. Having AZ left off the matchday roster last week, and you guys talked about it on Fallout, it reminded me of when Sam Adeniran was randomly left off the Austin FC starting the game day roster. And I was really worried about what that could mean, and my mind went to a dark place. But I did ask Bradley Carnell to clarify on Thursday, and he did confirm on Thursday there is nothing to read into that. He said they decided to be heavier stacked on the defensive side of things going into Miami, probably for obvious reasons, lending to Kojima getting that spot in the midfield where we were familiar with him in more of a central, deep-lying midfield role. He ended up being an attacker, which was a pleasant surprise, but Carnell said that he said very directly, no, nothing to read into. So it's just Ostrak, it's just Alm. Everybody else, good to go.
Good. Stuart, you're the only one that hasn't really weighed in on this AZ and Kojima on playing the 10. I didn't know what you thought about that situation and AZ being left off and what Matt just talked about.
I mean, sometimes players get left off, and if Carnell says don't read into it, I think you just hands off, don't read into it. It could be something we don't know, but they're keeping it internally if that's the case. With Kojima, I really like how he plays, so I'm not going to complain if he's in the lineup, sees more time. I was excited that he would see more time, but I didn't want it to come, obviously, at the expense of Tomas Ostrak.
Santi, quickly, I'll give you the fun question. Do you think Kojima started this one because it was defensive role, more of a defensive look, and maybe we won't see this going forward? What do you think?
Yeah, I initially was thinking that it was part of that internal competition that is going on every week to get a spot on the Gaydem lineup. But after listening to Bradley Carnell this morning, it makes sense if they were looking for a player that could do more on defense to have Jose Kijima. But maybe that will change for this Saturday. But at the same time, he plays so well that I think he earned a spot. So we'll see what happens with AC.
I'm very excited for that one. Matt, let's talk about transfers. It was a bad game for you to miss, but you got to kind of dabble on this new transfer, this new signing for City, and I was glad you did. And, maybe not right off the bat, but it felt like you kind of landed and hit the ground running with this.
This is the thing that pushed me over the edge on my little mini vacation of sorts, even from Flyover, is that the news on Jake Girdwood-Reich broke while I was still in California, and I didn't have reliable internet access on the beach of Santa Cruz. I was desperate to be able to talk about this, and I just couldn't. But 2 weeks ago, we heard Cedric Tukert, or actually last week it was Cedric Toyhert. I gotta get that right. Last week it was Toyhert. But this past Monday, Tuesday, Australia time, Jake Girdwood-Reich was made official. We've talked about him. The center defensive midfield converted to center back last year for Sydney FC, who's now 20 years old. He was announced signed through 2027 with an option for 2028. He will occupy an international slot, a U22 initiative slot as well. And I was able to confirm on Tuesday after Sydney FC released a statement saying that he was sold for a club record outgoing transfer, which would have put it greater than 1.1 million. It was also sourced in Australia that Sydney took in 1.3 million. I thought that was extremely high. And I was able to confirm that JGR was sold for $800,000 flat US dollars.
Yeah, what do you call it? The exchange rate. I don't know why no one thought of that.
The conversion rate, got it.
So that's much better, right? Stuart, what did you think about this signing once it happened?
Well, I think once the rumors came out, I felt pretty confident it was happening regardless. But yeah, when they posted the teaser, was that Tuesday morning? Yeah, they posted that teaser. It was kind of a fun thing that they put out there. But Australian fans, Socceroos, really are high on this kid. I know he's maybe a little aggressive in his tackling, but they wanted him to look to Europe. But I think any step up, and MLS is a step up from A-League, they're excited about. So I think from Australian fans, they're going to hope that he does really well with us in St. Louis, and in 12 months he moves on. But hopefully, as a St. Louis fan, he sticks around longer than that.
Absolutely, yeah. And I love, too, that he was willing to come here as a step in between here and Europe. And again, I hammer a lot that St. Louis really has to establish itself as a team that's willing to sell on players so that they're not afraid to come here. And I think this is a perfect example of that. Santiago, would you like to kind of read through some of these options? The U22 signing, a few other details here that we can lay out for the listeners.
Yeah, so definitely U22 signing, one of my favorite mechanisms for the club to use. He has a contract through 2027 with an option for 2028. Is the second player that the club has announced that will have under control through 2028. The other one is Tyson Pierce. And as you guys already mentioned, Lutz said that he has a German mother and a Scottish father. So there were rumors that he will go to Europe. But for now, he will be here in the United States. And hopefully down the road, the club will be able to sell him to Europe.
One thing I think, too, that's worth mentioning is by naming him as the second U22 initiative roster slot, City's doing one of two things here. They're either hedging their bets that these new roster rules will be ratified by the Players Association, which goes to give teams an automatic 3 U22 initiative slots, no matter the number of designated players you have, or they're throwing in the towel in this transfer window of saying we are not signing a third true DP. Because as the roster rules stand right now, if you have 3 true designated players, Roman Berkey occupies a restricted DP slot of sorts, but it's not the same as it's a max TAM deal. if we were to sign a third over 23 designated player, we would only currently be able to have one U22 roster slot or U22 initiative roster slot. And so it's a big deal that what this might mean later on in the transfer window, whether it's just playing by the current rules or hedging their bets, that they'll have some more flexibility upcoming with the new rules. I think that's going to be something to watch as well. And one thing too that I want to clarify is why a U22 initiative signing is important, because designated players are the flashy thing, right, guys? U22s, because we haven't taken advantage of them, and a lot of people might not know why they're important. And they're designed to sign younger players, allow you to do similar things as a designated player. Their transfer fee does not apply to their salary budget charge. So the fact that we paid $800,000 to get him, that doesn't go into what's hitting our budget. We can acquire him for anything, and that's fine. His hit to the salary cap will only be $150,000 for this year, prorated down to $75,000 because it's half a year, and then $200,000 for each of his subsequent years because he signed through his age 24 season. U22 initiative roster slots apply for players up until their age 25 season. That's why Chris Durkin also is still taking up one of those U22 slots and only hitting City's budget charge at $200,000. Massive for roster flexibility, massive for bringing in these talented young players and being able to take risks on them.
Absolutely. And, a lot of people, their first thoughts with all the rumors that have been happening about transfers, another one we're about to get to actually, but, Ostrak getting hurt actually made the international slot not a problem in this case, not something we ended up having to buy. And on top of that, having to pull, make room on the, the salary cap. That's not a worry either because Ostrak cleared out nearly all the very close to all the money that needs to go for the new signing.
Yeah, and it's probably just moving around pieces to the puzzle because with Ostrak being placed on, you presume, the season-ending injury list, that does allow you to sign a replacement player that can occupy his international slot while he's on that season-ending list, and the salary paid to that player can just be up to Ostrak's salary. And U22 initiative players can't make more than the max budget charge being paid to them. So you could easily say this Jake Girdwood Reich is going to occupy Ostrak's slot on the roster, on his international slot. And that's kind of how he slides in for this year. And then next year, you'll have to kind of rethink things. Maybe Ostrak gets his green card and it's not an issue. That's a problem for next offseason to talk about.
Another rumor, Ostrak's back home and could be getting his green card. So that would be really lovely. I had to. Well done. Thank you. We're just going to tease this for later. But another rumor was the former Dortmund defender Antonios Papadopoulos was rumored to come to St. Louis, and he went to the Swiss side, FC Lugano. And to tease it, we've got Carver of the BVB pod fame. He's joined us before to talk about St. Louis, and there's a lot of Dortmund and St. Louis adjacent news going on, and so it's just perfect timing to have him on. Not to mention the UCL final that happened recently. So that'll be something you can look forward to in the wind down. That's our extra portion of our podcast that comes after our radio show. You can only hear it on our podcast. So if you're joining us on the big 550 KTRS, we do thank you for joining us, Flyover Footy, for this radio show. Pardon me. But there is also a podcast you might want to listen to. The second half is a lot more laid back and fun, and we get a little bit more detailed at times, sometimes less detailed, depending on how it goes. I'm rushing along here because we have a lot to cover. So moving on, Matt, let's talk a little bit about Portland. I was so tempted to say Portugal. Portland is who we're going to talk about today.
I'd kind of like to talk about Portugal with the Euros coming up, but it's going to be the rubber match of sorts right now for Portland Timbers, St. Louis City. The teams played and split their games last season, and I bring up their games last season. They were early in the year for one reason only, and I found it notable that these two games last season against the Portland Timbers were the only two times that Edu Leuven has started in an attacking role, either at the number 10 or as a second striker, and Evander was just returning in their second match. It was just one of those oddities as to how the season played out between injuries to Klaus and where Leuven was fitting into the field. Indiana Vassilev actually played a central defensive midfield role where Leuven was higher up in that first Timbers game. I wouldn't read anything into it if you're projecting lineups. It was just like a fun fact because everybody mentions Leuven in an attacking role. These are the only two games that he's actually started for us like that. But this year, in 2024, going into it, St. Louis City is just below Portland in the standings. St. Louis, as we know from last week, is in 11th in the West with a 3-4-8 record, 15 games completed, 17 points to their name, 23 goals scored, 25 goals against. That's a -2 goal differential. We have a 3-2-3 home record, 3 wins, 2 losses, 3 draws. Most recently, obviously, the 3-3 draw against Inter Miami. And before that, we had our 3-game losing streak. So we'd like to put all of that to bed, build off of Miami, and move forward. It's notable to me that after having held 0 leads since Chicago, City grabbed 3 leads against Inter Miami. Good and bad, as they lost each before regaining it. But, it seemed like they really found a groove of sorts that they have something to build off of after Miami. Portland, on the other hand, we might be catching them probably at the exact wrong moment. They sit 10th in the West on a 5-7-5 record in 17 games, so they've played 2 more than City, on 20 points with a 0 goal differential, to where City has 23 goals scored, Portland has 32 goals scored, City has 25 goals against, Portland has 32 goals against. They're 2-5-2 away this year, but in their last 3, they're 3-1-1. Last week, they drew Houston 2-2 at home. Before that, it was a 2-0 win over Austin away, and then a 2-1 win versus Kansas City at home. Portland has scored the second most goals in the West, but they've also conceded the second most goals. I found it fun that Lutz did note this week in a City app video, but he said experts might put this as a high-scoring game, but Lutz was very sure to temper that, saying he's not sure, and it depends on how City shows up defensively as to whether that'll be the case. Portland has only been held goalless, though, twice in 17 games, and not since May 4th in a 2-0 loss at Charlotte. Before this 5-game stretch, and this is why I say that we might be catching Portland at the exact wrong time, before this last 5-game stretch where they were 3-1-1, Portland was awful. 3 losses, 3 draws, and 3 losses. That's their last 9 games. In all of the last 5 unbeaten, they've scored at least 2 goals. So in addition to turning the page from those 9 matches where they didn't have a win, they've also been pouring it in net quite a bit. So there's a lot of attacking focus that Bradley Carnell mentioned in his press conference. There's a lot of forwards that have some goal-scoring prowess that we're going to talk about here in a little bit. The one thing Portland doesn't have going into this game is a strong defensive shape, and that you can attribute to the international break. It seems like MLS tried to avoid this week for the most part because they only have 4 total matches this week, ours being one of them. But Portland's missing 3 key pieces to international call-ups. Miguel Araujo, a defender from Peru, Maxime Crépeau, goalkeeper who went to Canada, and Kamal Miller, their defender who went to Canada. Between them, Araujo has 8 starts and 12 appearances. Crépeau has 13 starts, 17 appearances. And then Kamal Miller has 15 games played out of their 17. So you're looking at like their goalkeeper 1, you're looking at their center back 1, and a center back 1/left back that they're going to have missing. In addition to that, they have a yellow card suspension that we'll talk about in a minute. You compare that to what St. Louis is missing with Kyle Hebert being out, and I think the favor in international call-ups has to go to City with that advantage. But other than that, I mean, Portland's their defensive structure seems to be suspect given that, but their attack, like we're going to talk about a little bit, is very potent.
Stuart, thought I'd give you a chance. I know you were following Kyle Hebert. There was a game today, wasn't there?
Yeah, Kyle Hebert was on the bench for Canada today as they took on the Netherlands, and they actually fell 4-0. Hebert didn't see any action, but it was really cool seeing in the official Canadian social media post, they had a picture of his kit hanging up there. The only thing with Portland I put in there is I think every year they have a slow start to the season, and they always come back and roar back into some sort of playoff contention. And it's almost a meme at this point. I know 2017, 18, 19, 21, and 22, they had slow starts. So just, yeah, at this point of the season, it's almost like Vermees and SKC. You don't want to hit them at a certain point of the season where they just kind of wake up, hit them early or hit them late, but not necessarily at this point.
Any thoughts so far from you, Santiago, on what we've talked about with Portland?
Yeah, definitely. They seem to have recovered from that slump they had, 9 games without a win. And the one thing I wanted to call out, even though they have allowed 32 goals in the last 3 games, they have only allowed 3. So looks like they are improving, but now they are going to have all these absences due to international call-ups. But I don't know. I don't like to read much into players that are out because you always get a surprise and guys hungry for minutes and they perform well. So I wouldn't read much into that.
Yeah, Maxime Crepeau, though, is a big one for me. I'm excited that he's out. I feel like I'd be a little bit hungry and eyeing the goal a little bit extra if I was an attacker for St. Louis City. Matt, we've got a lot of big names in this one, recognizable names. Why don't you introduce us to some if we have not heard of them?
Yeah, I mean, the first recognizable name is their head coach, Phil Neville. It's his first full season as the Timbers head coach. He's on a 3-year deal, which was a consternation among Timbers fans. He came off after having coached the England women's team to an Inter Miami squad that was just pretty poor under his run. He had a record with Inter Miami of 35, 42, and 13 in 2.5 seasons. The fan base was extremely underwhelmed, to say the least. Reports were that his technical staff were not impressed initially with his resume, but he seems to have started to turn the page and started to get some of the most out of some of the key players on his squad, guys like who are designated players who are really owning a lot of things that Portland's doing. Jonathan Rodriguez is one of those DPs, 30-year-old Uruguayan designated player signed from Club America during the most recent transfer window back in March. He's through 13 games, has 6 goals and 4 assists. So he's rounding into form. But the one to watch, and this is my key player of the game for Portland, and it's an obvious one, it's Evander. He's one of the highest quality number 10s in the league. In fact, Backheeled calls him in the second tier of number 10s in MLS after the Lucho Acosta tier, which is just Lucho Acosta. So the second best number 10 in all of MLS. And he's earned it, right? He's a 24-year-old Brazilian designated player signed from FC Midtjylland before the 2023 season. He's under contract with them with an option until 27. Last year, though, through 27 games, he had 9 goals, 5 assists. He had 73 shots, 48 key passes. So he was effective, but he wasn't setting the world on fire. This year, through 13 games played, he already has 7 goals and 8 assists, just 2 off the pace from all of last season on goals, and 3 more assists already through 14 less games played. 31 shots, so he's very efficient in his shot scoring capabilities. 32 key passes already, which is just 16 off the mark from all of last year. So that efficiency in goal scoring, prolific in finding his key passes to finish what he creates. His expected assisted goals per 90 this season have risen from just 0.14 last year to, and Backheeled called it, quote, an elite 0.35 per 90 this year. He's in the 93rd percentile in expected assisted goals per 90 among attacking midfielders and wingers. I mean, this guy is doing everything that he was signed to do and more. The entire offense runs through him. Like I said, there's a reason he's the second best number 10 in the league. And so he's the obvious player to watch. Bradley Carnell mentioned him multiple times in how they're going to approach him, saying he's kind of like their Messi. Tim Parker was very clear on Thursday to say he's not on the same level as Messi. But when you talk about a player who we know what Messi means to his team, Evander means similar things. If you were to use like a comparison or a metaphor, he does similar things to what he's able to do for Portland. The other player to not watch really is Diego Chara, and he's going to be suspended against this game. He's their club captain. He has the all-time MLS leader in appearances for a single team. He started 14 out of 17 matches, 14 matches out of the 17 they've played. He's played in 16, out with a yellow card accumulation suspension. And Chara provides a lot of stability for Portland in their central midfield. Whether he's playing as a pivot in a double pivot or a box-to-box midfielder, he's very physical. He's good on the ball. And he's missing in addition to their back line, their goalkeeper. So like Santi, I'm totally on board with the fact that you're going to get those surprise players, but you do have to give credit to the fact that missing a piece like Diego Chara is going to be as impactful as like City missing a Tim Parker whenever he's going to get suspended.
Yeah, for sure. He's a veteran player. He's the captain, has been around for so long, has broken records in appearances. And he's an important piece. But there is always that next man up mentality for teams and for players. So whoever plays to replace him is gonna step up. But I didn't realize until you mentioned it that he was going to be out. Portland has a lot of Colombians. Obviously, they will be playing City, but it's one of the teams I like to follow just because there are so many Colombians.
One of the other thing I think I have on Portland is not necessarily individual players, but it's just we'll get into the formation and their style here in a little bit. But I do have to call out that I view Portland as great finishers with a less than average buildup. Poor might be too strong of a word, but Portland is one of only 2 teams in MLS that have gotten more goal contributions from their DPs. They're elite as far as what Evander and Rodriguez are producing. And that's not even counting Felipe Mora, who's not really a DP, even though you might think of him as. Jonathan Rodriguez, Evander, and Mora do damage up front. Inter Miami has 32 goal contributions for DPs. Real Salt Lake has 36. Portland is right up there with that group. And so I think that is a reason why my stat of the night is on quality chances versus goals scored. I looked at the non-penalty XG, which we don't always go too deep into XG because of, don't dwell too much time on it. But now that we're a third of the way through the season plus, a halfway if you're Portland, then you start to trend some certain things. And through 17 games, Portland's non-penalty XG is 20.2, meaning their expected goals through the run of play, basically, or at least through non-penalty shots, should be about 20 goals, and they've scored 32. They're averaging 1.19 non-penalty XG per 90. It's not great. City, on the other hand, is actually doing better at them in a non-penalty XG per 90 rate, 1.28, because they've played 2 less games. And so they're 19.1 non-penalty XG, just below Portland. It's better overall because they have less games. If you look at non-penalty XG, non-penalty goals minus non-penalty XG. So this is the thing where St. Louis last year was overproducing to a crazy amount. People say they're going to regress. Well, St. Louis has regressed. They are now at negative 0.9, which is the 19th highest in MLS on non-penalty goals minus non-penalty expected goals. If you get a 0, then you're basically scoring what you're expected to score. Portland is at a plus 6.8, the 3rd highest in MLS. So they're scoring goals at a rate much higher than the numbers say they should be based on the types of shots they're getting. And that all ties back for me. I'll wrap this up by saying their forwards are elite. Rodriguez, Evander, Mora, you give them space in the final third, they will make things happen, even if they don't have much space at all. So I think anytime they get the ball, it's going to be dangerous no matter what kind of look they have, because you can't call it luck through half a season necessarily, but they're just finishing at a crazy rate compared to what they should.
Santiago, I loved in the Fallout episode that you brought up that Matt Doyle is now happy with the XG that St. Louis is producing. And I wonder what they had to say about Portland in that article. I'm not sure you read about it, but I didn't know if you had other thoughts as well.
No, I didn't read about Portland on that one, and it wasn't the XG. It was other stats, but I was really surprised to read something nice from Matt Doyle about St. Louis City. But no, just the talent they have between Evander, Rodriguez, and Mora. They have scored 21 of the 32 goals Portland has scored this season. And just when Matt was bringing the comparison between goals and XG, the one thing I thought right away was like City last year. Like Portland is what City was doing last year. Just with any chances they create. Obviously, this is a new game, but the stats show they are overperforming. So even if they create a couple of chances, and it has already happened in other games, that City does a great job defensively, but unfortunately, one of those few chances ends up in a goal. City has to be strong defensively, and Evander is gonna definitely be the key player in this game. He has been playing so well this year, and it's a player that City hasn't really seen, because last year when he came to City Park, he was just starting to play in MLS because he was injured at the beginning of the season.
It's so interesting to parallel what Matt has just laid out with the fact that Gio Savarese is the former coach at Portland, and it feels like there's a bit of a hangover perhaps with that great finishers, poor buildup that you were talking about there. Stuart, I know you were probably familiar with Gio Savarese, so it's really interesting to kind of think about Phil Neville versus Gio Savarese. Obviously, they're performing very nicely now after a bit of a slump. But it sounds like it's a similar setup. So, Stuart, I know you'd probably be familiar with both. I wondered your thoughts there on Portland in that regard.
Yeah, so real quick, Santi, would you rather overperform your XG or underperform your XG?
Oh, boy.
Overperform.
Yep, exactly. So, yeah, I'm a little envious of how Portland's doing on that third highest right now, 6.8 positive. With Gio versus Phil Neville obviously carries a lot of, former Man United, Everton player. He has a lot of baggage, not maybe in a bad way, but yeah, he's a loaded figure. Obviously, his brother Gary Neville is a pundit. But yeah, Phil managed Salford City, which was owned by the 92 class of Man United Academy. But anyways,
you pull out the deepest cuts.
I know, man. Goodness.
No, Phil has the pedigree. He has obviously a lot of knowledge. He came up through, I'm not a United fan, but obviously Sir Alex Ferguson is a huge name in the game, and he came up through that academy system. So he's been immersed in it, but it just depends on can he execute. And with the English women's team, he didn't quite do that. With Inter Miami, they didn't hit the heights that they wanted, but that was obviously during Paul McDonough and their roster issues, hiccups, shall we say. So I don't know, it's hard to see, but Gio Savarese, I think, is a really good manager. He did really good with New York Cosmos. I think he deserves more chances in the future. A lot of times you just have to gauge off of what they're given, and I don't think Neville was necessarily given the right. I mean, if you give Neville Messi, if you give anyone Messi, I think they'll succeed.
Yeah.
But
obviously he's playing a different style with Portland than at least Phil was playing a different style with Portland than Miami. So that's fun to watch too.
Yeah, I'd take Tata over Phil for what it's worth. So
well said. Matt, where should we go next?
Let's talk about St. Louis. I see Brett Stillman in the chat for our live stream says it best. He's joining late. It's Kojima time, baby. Whether you say Kojima or Kijima, I want to talk about what we think he's going to do next week. Bradley Carnell had a lot of good things to say about Kojima, and I think that he, no matter what we talked about earlier in the show, attacking minded versus defensive, center mid. Bradley Carnell said he saw a lot of very good things against very good counter-pressing team in Miami last week with Salio, Kojima, and Indy. And he said, quote, the way they put pressure on the back line was quality. And he noted the way they worked on exploiting space and transition, calling it their bread and butter. And this was on the heels of me asking Bradley Carnell if he liked what he saw out of that attacking midfield last week to the point where that is his next lineup up, so to speak. We always talk about the next man up in City and the plug and play type that Carnell runs for his system. But I was curious if he saw what he needed to see after the 27-minute mark where Alm got out, that this is enough to stabilize. Okay, give him another run out. And it does sound like that may be the possibility. Carnell said that gives me hope for games coming up now, that 3 attacking front. So when you score 3 goals, or 2, I think, after Alm left, I think there's enough positivity, enough confidence building in these attacking 3 and what they can provide in differences between them. Because, Kojima did have issues with his ball control and his decision-making a few times. He's young. It's going to happen. Yeah, he had a giveaway that led into one of the Miami goals. But overall, phenomenal performance. And I think he's earned himself the opportunity to keep that going. And if we know one thing from Bradley Carnell is he will ride the hot hands. He's done it multiple times last season. He's done it this year. That's why we ran out the same lineup for like 4 or 5 games in a row. And I think this is more of that. And I do think it's going to be Kojima at the 10 as opposed to Edu Leuven. I didn't get a chance to ask Bradley Carnell specifically about that, but there's a reason why I had that stat earlier on the number of games Leuven has started in an attacking role. I said it on X this week that, in my opinion, Edu Leuven belongs at that number 8 role, central midfield, right alongside a destroyer, right alongside a Durkin or a Blom. the vision and awareness that he has belongs in our midfield. He has the number of key passes that Edu Leuven has this season in just 6 games, a third of the minutes as Salio, Klaus, and Vasilev is approaching those 3 already. The number of key passes, which means passes that lead directly into a shot. His vision is perfect, and his wherewithal and his positioning on the field, central mid, is perfect to deliver service into the final third and let Salio dribble, let Indiana Vasilev cut over, draw players into him. He's so smart with the ball and against the ball on his defense that keeping him in that open space, bossing around the midfield is where he needs to be in his best position for what City can utilize him for. And I think last season we got ourselves into an issue at times when we had Leuven higher up and Vasilev further deep, because that's where Indy had started last season covering for Blom, that I think Carnell was a little, let's ride that train of Indy in central mid. This year, I'm so glad that Indy is freed up to work in the attacking third. The goal that he scored, I think that's something that he's been building towards. He's had multiple shots and opportunities. He could have had 2 or 3 goals. He had one right after the half that I think he should have scored. So there's a lot to like about the positioning, but I wanted to call that out because it directly impacts Kajima potentially being at the number 10 centrally for next week.
Lineup conversation is going to be fun, and maybe we can touch on this in the wind down as well. I think we all have probably a good, we could all put it like 15, 20 minutes each on that topic alone. I'm sure of it, but I think we'll save it for now at least. Matt, why don't you do one more before we go on to our lineups and predictions?
Yeah, I want to touch on Portland. So what are we going to expect from the Portland Timbers? Well, we can expect probably a 4-2-3-1 formation. When Portland has the ball, they largely aim to keep this shape, but when the game allows, they're going to have this asymmetrical look to them. They change their right side. They're going to push up with their right back. That's usually Juan Mosquera into some of those advanced wide positions. Think about what Thomas Totland does. We can expect similar from the Portland Timbers. They're very direct. They're very vertical. With Evander drifting over to the right-hand side, Evander working in the 10, he'll drift over to the right, and the right winger will often drift centrally, taking on the center back. So they change the direction of where the players go. And Bradley Carnell alluded to this, saying they're creative, but they're directional. He called out Rodriguez for being willing to run in behind, Moreno for being deadly on the dribble. Evander is their Messi, like I said, kind of. He drifts away for parts of the game, but then all of a sudden, especially in the last 10 games, he's got a ton of goal contributions. He's going to be the one who directs the ball and gets his share of finishing opportunities. He's coming good after that slow start that Santi mentioned earlier. Carnell said quick combinations, quick transitions, vertical and direct, and they're going to be on high alert for these 4 large portions of the game. And then defensively, Portland likes to set up kind of a 4-4-2 with Evander moving up higher to help their striker defend in the front line of those 2 players. And at times, Portland will have their wingers move into the forward line when they're able. It's not really a press because Portland is not one of the higher PPDA teams, passes per defensive action. They don't get into a high press. They kind of are happy to defend in a mid block and frustrate opponents. But I think you're going to see a lot of space opening up in the midfield as their wingers and as their number 10 Evander and their forward move higher. That could offer some opportunities for City because we know they're going to be playing this counterattack, high press, trying to attack their back line. So I think the midfield and the space that opens up in the midfield is going to be fascinating to watch if St. Louis especially tries to possess the ball, to see if they can draw Portland to kind of create that space and then work the ball through Edu Leuven in those open areas.
Good stuff. We are Flyover Footy. You're listening to us on the Big 550 KTRS. We're presented by Noble Ice Vineyards. We appreciate you joining us today, perhaps on the radio. We have a podcast as well that kind of goes into more coverage after we do this 40-minute portion for the radio. But if you are on the way to the stadium or if you're listening ahead of the game in St. Louis this weekend, we hope you feel a little bit more prepared. And here we are. We're going to try to guess the lineup. We're going to predict what's going to happen and maybe even predict the score here if we have time. And there's a lot to cover on this one. Matt, why don't you get us started with a baseline lineup here?
In my mind is the baseline. Berkey and net, Anthony Markanic, Joachim Nilsson, Tim Parker, and Thomas Totland on the back line. Chris Durkin, Edu Leuven, central midfield. Salio, Pompeu, Jose Kajima, Indiana Vasilev, the attacking mids, and Klaus up top. It's exactly what I've been alluding to this whole time. I think Kajima at the 10 makes sense based on what he did last week. I'm not going to be surprised to see AZ in there as well. He's the only other obvious person to take that role. And if he doesn't start, AZ will see time in the second half, obviously. But this lineup worked too well against Inter Miami and Bradley Carnell had too many things that they did well against the counterattack that they're expecting from Portland to change up too much, in my opinion.
Yeah, we decided to have some fun last week. That's all over, everyone. We get a nice, boring lineup this week.
Back to business.
Other than perhaps the debate on Kijima. What do you think, Santiago? Would you change this one at all?
It's very similar to Matt's. The only thing I have different is AC starting as the 10 instead of Kijima. Could go either way, I think.
I agree. Stuart, what do you think?
So I have the same, but I like AZ starting on the bench as a option coming off, and that's really the deciding factor for me.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. I think it'll be Kijima. I wouldn't be surprised if it was AZ, but it's just fun to kind of watch. Can Kijima like repeat what happened? You know, he was up against the world knows that Miami's defense isn't that great. So Kijima might have been really pouncing on an opportunity to have a bit of an open game, an open defense, and he was able to get a lot of really nice key passes in there, got an assist. I thought he looked incredible, and he improved so much on his previous performances in MLS. So 2 things I'm looking for is, can he repeat that? And the other one is, let's get AZ in there. He's had a bit of a break. He hasn't been playing much. I'm really curious what he's going to look like in a game like this. It's not going to be an open game, guys. It is going to be so tight in the back with Portland, and so we're going to need those guys to be able to pass around and cause some chaos in the right kind of ways. How does Kijima present chaos? How does AZ present chaos? How do they act as 10s? Are they passing 10s, pressing 10s? What are we going to see between the two? And that's what I'm watching for. And I'm really excited for it. We have plenty of time, guys. Let's do our prediction. Matt, let's start with you.
I'm going 3-1 St. Louis. I think Roman Berkey has another really strong game, and I feel bad that we go significant portions of this pod without calling out Roman Berkey's work rate and his just how much he stands on his head for this team for large portions of the game. He is the difference maker, the X factor. No matter what we say about the field players, we would have lost the Miami game without him. Just as we could have scored more goals, we should have had more goals scored against us, at least one more by Messi on his somewhat of a sitter. But there's just so much that he does that I think is going to pay off against this Portland Timbers team. And part of that goes in the lineups. One of the reasons I think Jose Kijima is going to be incredibly valuable is what Chris Durkin's probably going to have to do in not man marking Evander, because Carnell was very specific that they don't man mark, they ball mark, right? They follow the ball. That's what City's defense does. So if you ever wonder what they're doing when they change their shape or move across the field, they defend the ball. They get into those 2v1 situations to the ball handler or where the ball handler's going. But I think with Evander weaving in and out like he has been, Leuven dropping back if he needs to help Durkin and making sure they occupy those spaces. Kijima, I just feel handles some of those spacings better than AZ does, especially on the defensive end. And so I think I like how his look can go. And that all leads into my just further detail for 3-1, because I felt like getting in a little more analysis.
Yeah, 3-1. I agree with everything you said there. Santiago, what would you predict in this one?
Well, you're not going to believe this, but I had the same prediction, 3-1 City.
Hey. That was not rehearsed either.
No.
What do you think, Stu?
I'm always wrong, so I'm going to go 2-2 and hope that is a City win, not a draw.
Oh, okay, fair enough. So you think it'll be 2-2, but you hope for a win is what you're going with.
I'm superstitious at this point, so let's just go for that.
Yeah, I mean, we're often guilty of overthinking things, me especially. I enjoy that. I'm going to say 2-0 St. Louis. I think Kripo being out is big, and Chara too. I mean, everyone missing, but I think it's a good opportunity to make a statement at home against a team that's, missing a lot of key players. And I'd like to see them continue the scoring, and I do think Berkey's going to be able to hold him off, but we'll see. That's it from us, guys. We appreciate you listening. We're Flyover Footy on the Big 550 KTRS, presented by Noble Ice Vineyards. That's it. Enjoy the game, everyone. Bye-bye. Man, I've been trying not to repeat myself in the intros and outros. I did it again, but it was better than usual.
I mean, you got to keep saying Noble Ice Vineyards.
Oh no, I just
Right.
mean like I think I said that's it twice, and a lot of
Oh.
times I thank people twice at the end. So just trying to get better.
I don't know if you guys saw this on the chat, but somebody's gonna be at Novelized Vineyards on Saturday night, and he was asking if they have a TV.
Oh man, we should find out. I think we will find out very soon. Matt and I are going to go over there and do some kind of a cool video of some sort. Maybe get a tour, talk to some people, try some wine. I'm excited.
Oh, cool.
Try some wine and probably do some kind of either a live pod or a live pod recording. But we'll definitely get some video going on that. And Aaron Leak, shout out to Aaron Leak for going to Noble Ice.
It's awesome.
Let them know that you're a flyover listener. Maybe they'll give you a free tasting or something. Not that they would. I'm just saying, like, try it.
Yeah, Jason.
Phil sent ya.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jason, our friend Jason, good buddy, said that at Novelize they just had flyover episodes playing on repeat on their TVs.
Sure. That would be funny. Well, let's get a drink, guys. We'll come right back with Carver is gonna log in here with us as well.
All right, I'm out, guys.
Bye, Santiago.
Bye, Santiago.
Later.
Thanks for making it.
Good night.
Yeah, Phil, I'm out as well. So
What?
Well, thanks.
Did I hear that you're leaving too?
yeah, I got some last minute packing to do. So, but I won't hear that Melbourne victory story at all.
It's not even
Listening.
a story. It was a mystery kit.
Oh,
But
it's
I'm
a
now
nice
in
kit though.
Melbourne.
I love that
Yeah.
kit with the V that they have going across.
Oh, it's
done it.
yeah. I
Reminds
love
me
it.
of the STLFC one training kit from
Exactly.
2017.
Yes. Yeah.
And
Their colors are nice. Their crest's really nice.
Mm-hmm.
I love that crest.
And what I mean, I don't have a reason to be a fan of an A-League team. So if the luck of the draw is gonna happen, I'm just gonna ride it. Sorry,
Yeah,
Jake.
no,
Sorry, Jake.
it's die as cast right now.
Exactly.
Just don't wear it at Noble Ice or you'll get tomatoes thrown at you.
I won't do that. I won't wear it first time I get to meet Jake Goodwood Wright either.
Well, Stu, have the best time in Brazil. I'm jealous, man. I expect a full report when you come back.
Yeah, hopefully I'll put up some pictures. And I'm really excited to see the Maracana. So, Maracana. I can't pronounce anything correctly, so I'll just leave it at that.
Awesome, dude.
Have fun, man.
Have fun. See you later.
See you guys.
Yeah, Tim's bucket hat. I was debating what to do with these bottles of wine that I had that Noble Ice gave us. Obviously, I'm giving some to Phil here, but I can't just like open a bottle of wine to drink on the pod. I realized that it might be nice to like shout them out as a sponsor, but at the same time, then I'm forced into drinking a bottle of wine over the next couple of days because they don't hold. And I thought about doing their swirl sangria, which they have in cans at City Park, as like our wind down thing. But if you've ever had one of those, yeah, they hit you. That's like 2 glasses of wine in one of those cans. And they may be delicious, but I can't do a pod with 2 glasses of wine in me. I do have I probably won't even say it on the pod though, but I do have giveaways that Noble Ice gave me that I'm waiting for a city win to do, and I'm also waiting to be back in town to do. But city wins, and we'll have a Noble Ice Vineyards giveaway for next week. The sangria is actually Noble Ice does outside of City Park on, I don't know, it's not every match day, but some match days at the Lufuse Plaza, right next to Steve's Hot Dogs and Balkan Treat Box on the plaza, Noble Ice does samples every once in a while. So they will sample all 3 of their swirl sangrias that they serve at City Park, and they are delicious. The one in the red can is my favorite. Phil, do we have our guest joining us in a moment?
Yes, I think I miscommunicated with him, and I think he's in the voice channel.
Oh, on Discord?
On Discord, yeah. I think I wasn't clear enough.
I was trying to type out a response to Tim's bucket hat in the chat, and I'm like, what do I call him? Because his name's Bucket Hat. So do I say that's great, Bucket Hat? I just wondered if TBH.
Does anyone know his name? Maybe he's a Tim too.
No, his name's not Tim.
Bucky? Can we call him Bucky? Hattie? Ryan.
Okay. Now I feel better.
Carver, hey bud.
Hello, thanks for having me.
What's up, Carver?
Not a miscommunication for you. I just straight up went to the wrong link.
Oh, good. Okay. Right on. You're not the first. We have a million links in this place at this point. So how are you, man?
Doing good. How about you guys?
Good. Ready to talk about Dortmund. We were holding on to hope that there was a lot to talk about.
Right.
And they went and announced Papadopoulos like right before this, a day or two before the show. I was so sad for multiple reasons.
I know. It's been a rough few days. I feel much better than I did whenever we failed to win the Bundesliga last year. That was a rough weekend. But this time, just given the quality of Madrid, I was just happy to be there with everyone.
Yeah. We'll talk about it. I mean, there's a lot more than that to be happy for in some ways, not in every way.
They played an unreal game though.
Yeah.
I mean, just clinical domination of the ball progression. I was so impressed.
Yep.
Me too, man. I was really taken back.
Not to like rub salt in the wound or anything, but like I was watching that and from my hotel room, and I'm just like, I called it right before, like 10 minutes before they scored. I was like, Dortmund can't win if Real Madrid just keeps playing like this. They're going to score a goal, and good Lord, did they?
Yeah, that's what made it all the more heartbreaking, is we did play really well and really brave.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, Carver, we're going to talk a lot about, the topics I mentioned about Dortmund for sure. And we're going to touch on plenty of more city stuff. We'll mention the TST 7v7, not just Dortmund, but there's a lot of St. Louisans in that. And then Matt has a few City 2 things, a Carnell quote. And if we have time, I don't think we will, but maybe we'll touch on some Kijima and Leuven at the 10 arguments, because that would be a fun one.
Whatever you guys want to do, sure.
Awesome. All right, well, I'm going to hit record and we'll go. Welcome, everyone, to the Wind Down. I see the Urban Chestnut logo, but that's not a can I recognize.
It's a Stammtisch. I went with the low ABV one, the German style Pilsner.
Carver, do you speak any German?
Very, very little. I did take a class in college, and I'm on Duolingo a good amount. But I can understand, I guess, somewhat if people are talking. But if they were to ask me to respond, that's where I get pretty limited pretty quick.
I'm with you on that. Yeah. It is a lot harder. Well, yeah, I just mentioned Carver. Carver of the BVB pod is here to join us. St. Louisan. He's very knowledgeable about St. Louis City, so we'll talk a little bit about that. But there's been a lot of ties, a lot of parallel talk and rumors with St. Louis City and Dortmund in the last few weeks. And so we thought we'd schedule Carver for that. A lot of those rumors have died, but I think there's still a lot to talk about.
Or died down at least.
Yeah, I mean, nothing's terribly official.
Marco Royce has he hasn't signed with anybody yet.
That's right. So we're saying there's a chance is what we're getting at. But welcome, Carver. Thanks for coming back on the show.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you for having me, guys. I'm a big fan. I was just watching right before I hopped on. Sorry for the horrible lighting. I don't have any light in here. So Jake and I just record during the day, and I just have a lamp sticking right next to my laptop.
It's actually pretty impressive. It's a nice warm glow. So I think you're doing just fine. But let's talk about Dortmund, man. Absolutely love the team. You were just talking about how you're much happier than last year's conversation this time of the year. And so I am too. I'm a Dortmund fan. If I were to root for one European club, that's my club as well. And I think we should start with the UCL final because I mean that's the biggest thing I think they've done in the recent past. Don't you agree?
Oh yeah. Sorry, are you wearing a Cologne shirt? And you were saying,
oh,
what?
I am. My wife went to Cologne recently and she bought me this shirt. So
they've always got nice merch. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't have ever expected us to get anywhere near the final, let alone even like a semi, given just our domestic campaign this year. The contrast between the two has been appalling, really. You know, we can't break down bottom 6 teams in the Bundesliga who concede goals against every other team in the league. And then when they come up against Dortmund, they just somehow have this bravery to come at us and we have no answer. So the fact that we are able to get clean sheets against Paris, to keep them quiet, to, you know, overcome the adversity of Atletico Madrid and then be the better team, I would argue, in the final, it was very impressive. It just sucks that we actually didn't get the result.
Do you think there's something to that? Do you think it's because they just play better when they're kind of the underdog? You could even argue, do they play better when they're considered to be the worst team? I think that could be true in a lot of those cases, the games you mentioned.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then the other factor, I think the other driving factor would just be Terzic. I think his best strengths as a manager is just approaching the game that's in front of him rather than long-term. I think that's where a lot of his weaknesses start to show as a coach, and just him having these long-term plans against Bundesliga sides. But whenever he just has one game ahead of him that he could focus on, and at times, you know, it makes us look a bit more defensive with how we approach those matches. But either way, that's whenever we start to really kick on, and it's fun to watch again.
I'm going to be honest with you, man. I wasn't sure he was going to make it through the season based on, you know, how last year went.
Right.
And I just didn't think he was that quality of a coach, but there were some good interviews with him ahead of this UCL final that I was watching. He's like, I mean, the way he speaks, I like the way he speaks. It seems like he's very much a people person or a player's coach kind of thing. So I didn't know if you have changed your opinions on him or if he's kind of the same guy and just the results were different. I don't know what you think.
It goes up and down for me. I was on the board thinking he was and wanting him honestly out the door, just because it's not just the results that have been disappointing domestically, but also just like there was all this drama last summer surrounding him and just him basically driving our transfer window and having way too much power, at least in my opinion personally. So there was some really, you know, big turnoffs for me, but somehow in the second half of the season, 2 years in a row now, he just pulls dark magic out of his hat and is able to get us deep into a cup like this. I don't even know how to describe it. It's wild.
Yeah, I agree. Completely agree. I agree that it wasn't expected in any way, but I also didn't expect, Matt, you were saying it before, that this game would look so good for Dortmund because, you know, the first half and even into the second half, man, they were looking like the better team. I don't know how you felt about the final, at least the first half. Maybe walk us through the final and kind of your feelings and how you think the game went in general.
Not much different from anything you just described, honestly. There was some things that I were expecting from Madrid that I just didn't see come to fruition much. I mean, I mentioned before that a lot of bottom, any really quality of the Bundesliga sides, when they have a go at us, we just immediately like piss our pants and we're not able to progress up the field at all. But I don't know, there was just more space for us to work with against Madrid than I was expecting. Mats Hummels, the ball that he played into Adeyemi, I mean, he had time and space to dribble into midfield, and he's a center back. So that was just surprising to me for those kind of small moments that we were actually able to play our game and attack. But it paid off. You know, again, Terzic had a game plan in mind that actually did well in its execution, but you can't go out there and put the ball in the back of your net yourself. And Adeyemi is just, not just him, but, you know, he's pretty sporadic finisher, and Fulkrug just got unlucky as well.
Oh, interesting. Fulkrug. Yeah, I think I've caught a lot of games where Fulkrug looked great, so I think I've been pretty high on him this season. But I haven't watched every game, so that's just me. Matt, any thoughts from you or any questions you had for Carver on the final there?
Yeah, I mean, do you feel like that was a good cap for the Dortmund season? And do you put any stock in the finish in league play versus runner-up to Champions League? I mean, how would you characterize the season as a whole now that Champions League final is behind you?
If I had an answer to process that, man, I'm still going through it, to be honest with you.
5 days isn't enough time. It's got to be a few weeks later.
Come on, man.
Take your own vacation, take your own holiday, and then come back fresh faced.
Right. I mean, of course, it changes the game of how I want to proceed going forward with Terzic behind the wheel. I think he's definitely deserved a shot at starting the season again, but I would just be having personally, again, I'd be having him on a shorter leash if we're not able to consistently get these results domestically come in the fall. That's whenever he needs to be under real scrutiny again. I mean, there's been reports already about him having an extension, which at the very least, I can't remember whenever his contract's up. It's either like, I don't think it's even in the winter. It's probably next spring, but I just think it's a little bit too early at the moment, given just, again, how inconsistent he can be. But yeah, I mean, that final changed a lot of my attitude. I was really wanting this season to be completely over for months now. But then whenever we got the results first PSV and then we're going into Atletico, I was like, wow, this is a nice surprise.
That's cool. I think my last thoughts were, and just react to that if you like, but please say anything else you'd like to say about this final in conclusion before we move on to other Dortmund topics. But there were two thoughts I had about this game. And one was after the first half, I thought it was interesting to see, Vinicius and Rodrigo play up top. And after the first half, I was like, boy, does Real Madrid need a target striker? They're doing nothing in the attack. And I thought, man, did they mess up the game plan here? And then as the game kind of finished off, I was like, no, of course they didn't mess up the game plan, because, going at Dortmund on, with speedy, powerful guys, it really just kind of makes sense. And then the other thought I had is somewhat related, but, they looked like the better team, Dortmund did, in that first half and throughout a little bit of the second. And, the more they missed, the more I just got that feeling everyone knows Real Madrid knows how to win, right? Especially this Real Madrid. Most Real Madrids do, but this one too. They've been on such a good tear. They're such a quality team. They never seem to lose their heads. And so the more Dortmund missed, the more I thought, boy, they're just asking for this to be finished off in the last third of the game. And that ended up happening. But I don't know if you had thoughts on those, please do, but please, anything else you'd like to add about the UCL? I'll
keep it short. Brett said it best. I mean, that's what makes it all the more terrifying for next year is they go and get Mbappe. They won the Champions League and then they go get Mbappe. It's just not fair.
The rich keep getting richer.
Right.
Yeah. And then did you see the tweet that was how young all these players are? I didn't think about
that. I know. Ancelotti has done some really great work. I mean, I don't watch much Madrid, but just even last summer thinking God damn, look at that midfield now. They're recreating the Modric and Kroos with these Bellinghams and Tchouaméni. And I was a big fan of Camavinga too. It's just ridiculous.
Well, definitely a game to be proud of, even though the score didn't go their way. I think they went further than, obviously we both agree that they went further than we expected. But there's, Royce's last game in the league play was a good one. It was a good memory, Marco Royce. And I'm really excited that it went well for him. He's always been one of my, favorite players in the entire world. What a great guy, great player. The way he plays, he seems to have the right frame of mind for the sport to keep going. And, the rumors came out that St. Louis was a target and he was a possibility. I was shocked, a little shocked, not terribly shocked, but, I started to doubt it based on his age and a few other things. How did the Royce rumors strike you as far as his rumors to possibly come to St. Louis City? How did that strike you?
It didn't feel real at all, but it just feels like a dream. But at the same time, I was feeling the exact same way for Berkey. And I think a lot of us were too, right?
That's true.
Whenever the rumors start popping up, it's yeah, okay, sure.
Right.
This club isn't even a thing yet. And Berkey's going to go play at a college stadium. Yeah, okay. But I mean, some of it made sense though, right? And a bunch of us have talked about it already for the past few weeks about there are, some aspects and similarities between the clubs and just the profiles of what they want from each other. So a lot of it made sense. And it's we don't know for sure yet, obviously, what's going to happen, but it looks obviously more and more unlikely by the day. But it was a fun week or two to relish in that moment.
Completely agree. What do you think? Let's dream for a moment. What do you think Royce would have been like for St. Louis City? Obviously, how many games could he play is kind of in the equation. Could he press, at his age and do what Carnell would ask of him? Would he need to? Would he be able to just play make and be fine, with all the other 10 guys running their butts off around him? How do you think Royce would have looked in a City shirt?
Well, I think the pressing would have been, you would have seen a lot of that here for City. I mean, whenever he did come on, he had a much smaller role for Dortmund this year. But when he did come on, he would provide a lot of that pressing because Fulkrug was not that man. Even whenever Haller was fit enough to play, he was also not that man to provide the pressing either. Adeyemi at times, but that was more of out wide kind of thing. So Royce would be that central player that's going to provide that pressing. I think that could be the same thing here. I think him and Klaus sort of linked up really well as well. I mean, Royce is an incredibly unselfish player, almost to a fault at times. So, I know he would have been loving to set up Klaus and just more players around the block for City's attacking front line, but some other things too. But what do you think?
Well, it would have been nice to have his vision. And I think with the emergence of Celio Pompeu even this season, Klaus could have focused on just finishing for the most part. And even if he was able to interchange with Royce, I think that would have been pretty common. I think Royce would have run in behind if Klaus was trying to play make a little bit. And Klaus's vision is great. And Celio has so much talent on the ball. Mm-hmm. He's a threat. And I think Royce would have just enabled these guys to be all the more successful. Like just the attacking in general, I think it would have been incredible. I think the ball would have been moving around like crazy in the final third, and we wouldn't see so many missed passes in the final third. I think teams would bunker on us even more. And I think we'd be shocked at how often we kind of were still able to score. Whereas right now that's a problem for, teams bunkering against St. Louis. So I would have loved to see it. It's a dream. I'm imagining, the ball moving around like crazy in the final third between those players I just mentioned and Alm. If Alm was healthy, goodness gracious. I mean, the 10 is kind of the position we're missing.
Right.
And Toikert's going to fill it in a different way, I'm sure. But Royce would have been, up there with some of the top players we could have gotten in the entire world, not just as like hopes and dreams, like one of the best players in the entire world for St. Louis City to have, because I agree, he does press. He would run his butt off for us. I believe
that's one of the things that I was thinking, that it's not just the epic level and talent and how high level that would be compared to what we have now, but the system adjustment would have made sense, right, Carver? I mean, that it's not abnormal the age might have been a factor, but at the same time, Royce was still doing what he's doing against Bundesliga opponents, not as every match starter, but he was still capable of it. And so regardless of if it would have been, 65, 70 minutes every single game, you would take that every single day, right? If you're looking at a Marco Royce in this system.
Yeah. And I think the smaller role that he took on, I wouldn't even say that was, of course, age was a factor, but I don't think it was as big of a factor as some people might have thought. Terzic, I think he was pretty clueless at times with what he wanted from his midfield. There was so many, an overwhelming amount of moments this season where just the midfield were completely clueless on how to progress the ball whatsoever. We would spend, not exaggerating, 2.5 minutes trying to get out of our own third, not even our own half, and failing. So he tried to do a bunch of different things with his midfield, but I just don't think he fancied Royce in his system particularly. But I think, it doesn't mean it couldn't translate and he couldn't do those minutes over here. Just for the players around him and this hard-working, aggressive City side.
Yeah, in some ways, I do wonder if Bradley Carnell would use him better. I really, truly do.
Yeah.
It's a different story because he would be so so good here.
Right.
It's different.
Well, and I think the number 10 in the St. Louis City style isn't a traditional number 10. Like, we don't ask our number 10 to carry the ball forward and to play make for those around him necessarily. It's all as part of that transition offense. It's all part of the gegenpressing type of a system. And so it's not a traditional, but at the same time, I think Marco Royce is familiar enough with pressing and turning the ball over at high enough areas of the field that you only have 40 yards to go, that one or two passes, and he has that vision that it would have worked. And regardless of how often you ask him to possess the ball, or even a number 10 like a Kajima, like we talked earlier, Indiana Vasilev, AZ Jackson, whoever it is at whatever level, like they're not being asked to possess the ball and have 3 or 4 passes strung together before we end with a shot. It's just that initial quality, that instinct, that extremely high level awareness that Royce would have brought to City that I think we're still lacking. So it's not, and I have this conversation I want to have with Papadopoulos, but even with Royce, it's like we were in on Royce because he would have fit and elevated that position that we need elevated. I don't think, I mean, the answer might be Kojima long-term, maybe, like it could be that he turns out to be that player, but right now that is, like Phil said, I think an area of St. Louis City that no matter what that position, left, right, 10, forward 10, whatever is asked to, is whoever that is, we need better from that spot. We need just more effectiveness.
Absolutely. As an aside, like really quick, Carver, I can't resist. I'm sorry. It was interesting to me to hear you say that Terzic doesn't know how to use his midfield. How does dude, it just sounds like Reyna, doesn't it? Like Royce and Reyna are really somewhat similar players, right? Do you think that's part of why he's out of favor?
Yeah, I mean, I would argue Royce has a lot more of a defensive work rate. Now, Reyna is improving in that fact, but just the whole last year and a half, which is crazy to think it's been that long. I don't know. It's just really stunted him. And a lot of, I mean, people thought that the move to Forest wasn't going to be great for him either. How was he going to do much there and get into a side in the Premier League with just the other attackers around him there? But yeah, I mean, they have similar qualities for sure. I mean, they're both very quality and attack, but I think the defensive work rates is probably where they differ. But Terzic just likes all over the field, midfield, every part of the team to be very tenacious, taller, bigger, and he, at least that's what he wants to go for in the market, and that's what he talks about in his pressers. But at the same time, you look at and I've talked plenty much about Mecha on our team already, or on our show already, but Mecha has not brought that really at all. And even though Terzic spent so much money on trying to get that exact profile in the team.
That's so interesting. One to watch next year, especially that was good information for me personally. So the prevailing rumor now for Royce is that he's going to go to LA Galaxy. There's a new Royce Lewandowski option rumor being thrown out there now, which is man, that's super interesting. I see you shaking your head. Tim's Bucket Hat asks, where does Royce slot in for LA Galaxy, though? It sounds like they're probably the top destination for him, but where does he slot in? That's the big question, especially with Lewandowski there.
I don't know. I mean, Ricky Puig is their number 10. He's he's the guy who the ball moves through. And so what does his role look like with Marco Royce stepping in? Are they really talking about bringing Royce in to be alongside Puig? Is this going to be, I mean, you add the quality no matter what. I think anybody would take that. But you risk, I think, adding him to the locker room and a level of disgruntledness if you're asking Ricky Puig to take a diminished role, which I don't think would ever happen. I think he just signed a new contract, in fact, that Ricky Puig is your franchise player if you're the LA Galaxy, and everything is built around him. So whatever Royce's role would be with the LA Galaxy, whether it's alongside him in the midfield and they take Brugman or something and give him a more diminished role. I just think whatever Royce is going to be asked to do for the LA Galaxy, if that's where he does land, it's going to be to complement Ricky Puig.
Yeah. And where does he fit? He has played on the wing, right? So that's an option. Benching Brugman that blows my mind, but he'd have to be benched in this situation. What do you think, Carver?
I'm still pretty new to the MLS, so I definitely refer to you guys for that sort of thing. But I mean, from what little I do know about the LA Galaxy, I'm also very curious. I mean, you guys have mentioned Puig already. He has played as a number 11, Royce, for, I mean, probably the first 8-9 years of his career, before he started to slowly move more central. I don't know, though. I mean, don't they have also a number 11 on their team who's pretty good quality too?
Paintsel is
Oh, I thought he was a 7. But he could be both. I don't know.
Well, he legitimately alternates sides like he did against St. Louis City. He alternates sides. But Gabriel Peck is the other one. So that's why I immediately went to the midfield and looking at whether it's Marco Delgado or Brugman at the 6. I don't know, because you just brought in Gabriel Peck and Joseph Paintsel, and both of them are playing extremely well. And your out and out number 9 is Dejan Joveljic. So the quality is there in the attack, and that's why the Galaxy are one of the better teams in MLS right now. It's at an abundance of wealth that they're going to have if they really bring them on. I don't I don't see any of those. And yeah, Tim's Bucket Hat in our chat calls no chance they bench Ricky Pouge, Joseph Paintsel, or Gabriel Peck. And with those out of the way, you drop back to the number 8. And
he can't do that on a consistent basis. He's definitely dropped deeper over the years, and he's helped with build up mostly. I mean, even just in like defense where he tracks all the way back, which is kind of crazy. But that is something he will definitely not be able to consistently do. There's no way.
And they run a 4-3-3 typically. So we're running out of positions here unless you're looking at a timeshare with one of these other players, and the volume of matches is not there to where that really makes sense. You don't have these other competitions competing for your priority right now. If Lewandowski comes, then you're looking at Lewandowski probably sliding in for Dejan Joveljic. I think that seems pretty easy to replace. Quality wise, I'd probably still think Lewandowski would be a step up. But Royce, though, I mean, you just brought in Gabriel Peck. You just brought in Joseph Paintsel. What are you doing here? Not to borrow Taylor Twellmanism from years ago, but like, what are they doing here?
I mean, it does kind of remind you of the new LA Galaxy rather than the old, where they're just spending money and not thinking about anything other than buying. They're pulling at Chelsea, right? That's what they've been doing for a long time, and it was supposed to get better with Greg Vanney, right? And it has
post Chris Klein era,
yeah. Right, exactly. It's been getting more practical. He's been bringing in a lot of like hardworking MLS veterans, but now like looking at if they do go through with all these rumors, and maybe that's the answer. Maybe they're just rumors and they're not going to happen. But if this happens, it'll be really interesting.
And it won't be cheap.
It won't happen.
It won't be cheap at all, because not only have we heard reports that Royce doesn't want a max TAM deal, he wants to be paid by the LA Galaxy. But also, even if he were to take a max TAM deal, the Galaxy are paying in essence a transfer fee to Charlotte just to be able to get him. And at last rumored, it was $350,000 is what Charlotte was asking. So it's not a massive transfer fee. We just paid $800,000 for a center back, 20-year-old center back. So, it's not the worst thing in the world. And maybe it's pennies on the dime for what they're doing, but still, I mean, it's an investment into a player that it's not easy to see where he massively elevates any one position that he would be able to slot in for. And I mean, that's a credit to the Galaxy and their roster building, because with City, we just talked about Carver, right? With City, it's obvious what he would be able to improve. Not so much for the Galaxy in my eyes.
Yeah. Right. Any last thoughts on Royce, Carver?
No, I don't.
Great. I want to talk about, I got really, it's funny how excited I got about Royce. It wasn't much less excitement for me when the rumors about Antonios Papadopoulos came up, because last I heard he was kind of an up and coming center back for Dortmund. Maybe something happened to that, so maybe it's not true anymore. But in my mind, there was a decent profile for this guy as a center back. But maybe you can correct me or confirm. What do you think about Papadopoulos as a Dortmund player and perhaps as an MLS player?
I wouldn't personally say he was anyone that was like going to be a serious candidate for like a consistent role in the first team. He was always someone who was going to be that like leader and man in the second team, and then just kind of like a face to bring around for, almost every preseason game. And then whenever we're hurting for injuries, which is actually a lot more than people think. I think he only made like 8 appearances for the senior team, but in those just 8 appearances, he had some good moments of saving our butts. He's really aggressive, of course. He's consistent winner and proven winner of his duels. So, and he's also, he promoted the second team to the 3rd division in Germany just this past year.
Nice. Which
is higher than most other second teams for higher Bundesliga clubs. So, our second team is usually, performing a lot better than most people might think. So I could see how Lutz would definitely have some interest there.
What would you say he was like the 4th center back for Dortmund?
For the senior team?
Yeah, for the senior team. Worse?
I guess. Yeah. It was also, at times we would maybe put Chan back there. We're kind of all over the place with center backs now, man. Jake and I both have been saying for literally almost 2 years straight, how is this team not signed another single center back? And it just still doesn't happen.
His contract was expiring, right?
Yeah.
I think about Dortmund and center backs, and I feel like I'm always excited about who they sign, and they don't pan out as well as I always hope they're going to be. Like, who's that French center back that was like so good for so long, left-footed? He's young.
Yeah,
he was on the team and he's like disappeared off the face of the earth, in my opinion.
Zagadou. Yeah, he was arguably my favorite center back for Dortmund. Yeah, we got him when he was 17. He was played like left back as well as a 6'5", you know.
Right.
But he had I mean, if you guys think Royce had a bad history with injuries, Zagadou was way worse. So the club just didn't think it was worth the investment.
Well, that we won't waste more time because that rumor's over. He signed, like I said, in the first portion of the show with FC Lugano from a Swiss club on Wednesday.
The one thing that I do
put in the notes for me. Thank you.
Yeah, the one thing that I do want to quickly discuss from a St. Louis City perspective, though, is this rumor came out on the heels of Jake Girdwood Reich.
Yes,
and so you're looking at Girdwood Reich was a converted midfielder to a center back, and because of his success this past season for Sydney FC at center back, then we have these Papadopoulos rumors where he's also a center back. Now, do you guys think this was a one or the other situation to where Girdwood Reich was the goal, but we were it's the big board, right? You're never going to go after one guy to the exclusion of everybody else if you're looking for a position of need. And so if we see that now two center backs had been rumored, in my mind, that says at the very least there was an area of need to sign a younger, I think Papadopoulos is like 24, right? So there's a need to sign a younger-ish center back for the future, regardless of what ends up happening, whether Santi gets his way and Tim Parker's let go, or whatever happens long term. But do you think this was really City would have signed both of them if they could have landed Papadopoulos? Or from a City, this is a City-specific question based on the fact that we have Joachim Nilsson signed through 2027. We have Kyle Hebert signed through 2027. Yarrow and Parker's contracts are up. Whatever happens with them, we have Michael Wenzel with City too. Like, would we have really signed two center backs in this window, or because we got Girdwood Reich, Papadopoulos was less of a need? That's where I'm looking at.
Phil?
Well, my answer's long. Carver, maybe you should start. I'm happy to give it, but
you said I've been trying to read up on Girdwood lately. You said he was more of like a center mid turn center back, right?
Yeah, he came up from their academy and through their youth as a center defensive mid, and then just last season they converted him to a center back for the entirety of the year. Okay.
It's funny. I think Antonios was kind of the opposite of that, where at least in his younger days, he was pretty much exclusively just on the back line as a center back. And then of the last year, maybe two, he started to move up kind of as a number 6. But I would think this is probably just one or the other kind of thing. I mean, I would argue we still need another number 6 at the moment.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure.
I agree with you. I think we do need a 6. And I think, the overarching non-specific answer is just the fact that those guys do both play both positions. I agree that maybe we're short a 6, that it just gives flexibility. And Lutz is always thinking for the future. And I think about last year, I think about how we had John Bell on the roster in addition to all the other players we had. And then halfway through the season or so, we get Wenzel, right? And it's just like, Lutz, like, I don't see, where do all these pieces go? Like, what are you doing, man? And I think, in my opinion, the first answer I would ever bet on, and I'm a terrible gambler, but my first bet would be like Lutz likes having lots of center backs on his roster to choose from. Like, just maybe he doesn't trust them. Maybe he isn't sure how it's going to work out. Maybe he feels like he's not a good scout on that. Or maybe he just likes to have them ready to go in case something happens. Matt, it looks like you have thoughts.
Yeah, and I cringed the moment you said maybe he doesn't trust them, because I know that's not what you meant, but that's not it to me. It is more to me, he needs options. And the reason he needs options is how crucial the center back role is in our system. How many times have you seen
the right center back, right? Especially.
Well, that's Tim Parker's spot right now, but yes, that's it. I mean, especially
the correct style of center back, which is a little harder to find, right?
Yes, and it's because we leverage those two center backs to be our last men back to a like the biggest possible extent you could think of. Our fullbacks push high. Totland, Marcanic, Durer, or Nerwinski or Watts, whoever it is, they push high for large amounts of the game. So much so that oftentimes, if we turn the ball over, it is just our center backs on an island back there. How many times have we been burned in transition? Just a moment in a game. You talk 96% of the time, Parker and Nilsson or Hebert or Yarrow, they play fantastic center back. And you walk away thinking they had good games. But there's one moment where somebody breaks through our two center backs, or Parker misjudges something, or Nilsson goes for a tackle and does it's the roles of the center back are so important based on how high we operate and what we intend to do off the ball to create those turnovers high on the field, that if those center backs are exposed and aren't up to the quality that we need them to in their pace and their 1v1 open field tackling abilities, we're going to be in a world of hurt over and over in each game. And so I think that's why you're probably seeing all these multiple center backs being given looks. Hebert proving himself and given a long-term contract. Having Girdwood Reich occupying a U22 initiative slot and an international slot on an $800,000 transfer fee. Significant investments in comparison to everybody else, because that's the importance of this position. And so it doesn't surprise me that we keep hearing, going back to the well, you have Wenzel, you have Benitez down at City 2, all these players being given looks and seeing who fits, and because you need to hit on multiple great options at center back, left center back and right center back, to your point, in order to feel comfortable about rolling somebody out of that role.
It's extremely well said, Matt. I'm glad you clarified that or corrected it even, because it's also, it makes sense too to get those hybrid center mid center backs, because a center mid converted to center back or vice versa, obviously, they're going to be better on their feet. They're going to be more mobile. They're going to be the kind of guys that we need to bring in. And on top of that, I think the reason we're bringing these guys in now, we all know that Lutz isn't buying someone for now, right? Mm-hmm. Even Toykert. I know a lot of people think we're putting a Band-Aid on a roster, and we're not, right? This is a guy that's going to be useful to us for a long time. And a lot of these guys are coming in. Ignore Toykert. I think he's ready to go pretty quickly. But a lot of these guys are coming in for thoughts of the future, and they're not ready right this second. They got to cook. They got to get in the system. I even think Yarrow had his best game with the team, his final start with the team before he got injured. Yeah. And I think that's not an accident. I think he's been with the team for so long, and he's still just now getting his feet under him to play the way that City needs to play. Because, like you said, Matt, we ask a lot of our center backs, and one little mistake can be magnified into something massive, unfortunately, just the way we play. So, yeah, I think it's like bring a lot in, train them up, get them ready 6 months, a year from now. And then lastly, everyone's like, we're losing Tim Parker, right? And we keep throwing Santi onto the bus for fun. It's been
it's all in good fun.
Yeah, it's been a fun gag we've been going with. But it's not just Tim Parker. Blom's out of contract soon. It gives us, we may be selling some of our players on. And it just gives us so much flexibility to do whatever needs to happen with the roster. These guys can play multiple positions. So, I'm excited to bring these guys in because I think Lutz will be able to do whatever he wants. We maybe won't need a Band-Aid of any kind, even though we may feel like we need it. Right now, it might be just like this is covered long-term and we're fine.
Amen.
Oh boy. Yeah, that's a crazy feeling to be able to say something and not have a follow-up correction or thoughts more. Carver, I think that kind of wraps up our Dortmund thoughts. You've been very kind, letting Matt and I talk a little too much. Anything you'd like to say about Dortmund next year? Anything with the rumors with City?
Or even have you been paying attention to Dortmund at TST?
Ooh, yeah, because that's our next move.
I have not actually. And I just want to say you guys have not been hogging at all whatsoever. You guys are good. I felt like I was the one hogging for a while talking about the final.
No, I loved it. That's why you're here, bud. But yeah, the TST is our next move here. And how many players do we have in TST, Matt? Is St. Louis, St. Louis, the region, is able to claim? Is it like 30 guys, 20 guys?
Brian Simpson runs STL Soccer Tracker. If you're not following STL Soccer Tracker on Twitter, please do, because he's had to go multiple pages because of TST. And just how many former St. Louis players, current Ambush players, like all kinds of just St. Louis attachments, including It's just epic how many St. Louis players are involved in this. And I think it's just a fun tournament to watch, right? It's like soccer all day during the summer. What could you ask for more? Obviously the big St. Louis thing that we're focusing on at the moment is Dueling for Lincoln FC, the team from St. Louis, who is supporting the charity arm Dueling for Lincoln, who, if you're not familiar with that story, or if not familiar with TST in general, it's a 7v7 soccer tournament put on by the same folks who put on TBT, the basketball tournament. And they just have a men's and a women's side. And we've got legends, quote unquote, from Dortmund. I don't know how legendary they really are, Carver, but that's how they're being billed. Same thing with like Bayern Munich and I think Barcelona. Sergio Aguero has a Man City team. He's doing Nani's out there with a team. Pat McAfee has his own team. So it's just it's fun, right? And St. Louis has a ton of representation. Dueling for Lincoln is not only a great feel-good story from St. Louis, supporting because one of the founders of them had an issue with their child and dealing with child loss. And it was a tragic story that has spawned just a magnificent cause, Dueling for Lincoln, if you want to Google that. But also Dueling for Lincoln won 3 straight games in their first 2 days of the tournament, beating the Town FC, Bayern Munich, and Dortmund. And it's been a fun tournament to watch because of some of the rules they've had. Like, it's basically a golden goal to win, but the way they do their final goal is they take the final score after regulation. So if the score is 4-1 at the end of regulation, 2 20-minute halves, then the target score is 5. It's 1 plus the score of the winning team. And that's what the goal to win must be. And so it could be a score of 5-4 in that scenario, or 5-1 or whatever, but you got to get to 5 goals at that point. It's a fun tournament to watch. And not just for, Dortmund has a team, like I mentioned, but all the St. Louis representation is extremely fun to watch all over the place. And the tournament's hitting the knockout stages this weekend. So while City plays Portland, the knockout stages, round of 32, 16 on till the next week or so for the finals. It's just a fun summer thing to tide us over until Copa America and the Euros.
It's really cool too. I even get this vibe like early Open Cup, right? Because early Open Cup teams are just like these teams thrown together with just like the best players in each city. And it's like, that's the vibe we're getting, is just these players are just like guys in St. Louis that are around. They're not professionals anymore, or maybe they're almost professionals and they're young, and they're just forming a team and playing guys from Europe and surprising them in a lot of ways. It's been a lot of fun in that way. I just feel like this is like an early Open Cup vibe in that way. So yeah, I've enjoyed it.
It's a good call.
Matt, let's finish with your quote, because I knew this is the quote you were going to go for when you said you had something to talk about. And because I know you've been kind of watching out for this and you got to ask this question today. I'm glad you did. Why don't you hit it with this Carnell quote?
I was very guarded with this because in press conferences, I've learned that you have to ask questions in the right way if you want to get a really quality answer. And I think I nailed it on Thursday. And I was lucky because I
also don't want to ask a question like, here's an opinion I have. What do you think about my opinion? Right.
Or rumors are, or people are saying, or there's talk of, like, that's not how you preface questions, because you're going to get answers like, I've never heard that, or those people don't know what they're talking about, and you'll get brush off type things. So I asked a question about City 2, and I phrased it in a way that called no player out. And I just asked, in general, what are the thought processes behind sending players down to City 2? And have you ever had a player who did not want to go down and play for City 2? And Carnell was very honest. And he usually is, if you ask a question the right way, or if you're very thoughtful with your question, he'll be very honest. That's how I was able to get the Sam Adeniran answer from earlier this season on why he was training by himself, those kinds of things. So Carnell said, in my question of has a player ever not wanted to go down to City 2? Carnell said, quote, "I'm not a coach who is going to lead conversations into it. I can only recommend game minutes, but I know there are certain parameters we can and cannot explore with regards to inviting players to play for City 2. He goes on to say, that's between the player, the player's agent, and the Players Association. There's an agreement there, which we can't influence, but we can influence and show value that we appreciate, and we can see the benefit of playing City 2 minutes when you're not getting regular game time or you're recovering from an injury. So it's definitely valuable without taking development away from the kids at City 2. Carnell went on to note Jake Nerwinski, most recently going down, showing true leadership, as he said, and buy-in for what he needed to do for 90 minutes. And he had a good time. And it was great to get him on the field for 90 minutes. And that's a benefit to him. Carnell finished by saying, it's up to the players if they feel value in that. Unfortunately, I can't stipulate or enforce. It's up to the individual if they would like to advance or proceed or develop within their careers. And in the moment, guys, like I understood what he was saying, putting it on those, saying it's really up to the player if the player wants to do it. But also there's more to it than the coach player conversation, the player team conversation. You have agents. MLS Next Pro is a 3rd division league. Keep that in mind. So you're asking players to go down 2 professional tiers to play professional minutes. So I get all that. But that last piece, it's up to the individual if they would like to advance or proceed or develop within their careers. That hit hard. And it's obvious. I didn't name names for obvious reasons, but it's obvious who we're talking about. And since we're on the tail end of the podcast, you look at players like Nicholas Dewar right now, who's not getting minutes with City, who Carnell has said we're still bringing along. He really hasn't said anything negative about him, but at the same time, he hasn't said he's been overly impressed with anything yet. Still coming along. The fan base has their opinions on Nukvi Thoresen, but Thoresen still continues to see minutes for City. So I don't know that I would expect him to go down to City 2 for that reason. We're just talking about staying fresh, getting minutes. Jake Nerwinski, perfect example. He wasn't playing with City. Akil Watts started in Nerwinski's at backing up Thomas Totland that one game last week. Joachim Nilsson played for City 2 in his return from injury. I mean, you're seeing all these different guys for reasons that they're either not playing or they're returning from injury, to exactly what Carnell said. You can point to examples. I don't know that I could really point to anybody that I would say, now that we've seen Jake go down to City 2, I don't know that I'd point to anybody and say, this player is just not getting any minutes. They need to be down at City 2, other than Nicholas Dewar at the moment. And so it's hard not to draw that straight line to what Carnell was saying, and it referencing something is going on with the fact that Dewar either doesn't want to go down there, his agent, Players Association, maybe it's in his contract. I don't know, but Carnell can't force players to go down to City 2. And that's the biggest takeaway for me, is that I think we now have a little bit more clarity and understanding, I feel, on why it's not an automatic thing of players don't play for City and then they don't play for City 2. Like, what's the deal there? Carnell was pretty upfront about all of that, in my opinion.
It wasn't pointing fingers either in any way. I mean, he's just saying there's a lot that goes into it. But I think your conclusions there, Matt, are good. Any thoughts on that, Carver? Any thoughts on Dewar or anyone on the roster? I think we should touch just shortly on, what do you think? We have heard about everyone's opinion on Kijima versus Leuven at the 10. What about AZ not playing the last several games? What do you think about that whole situation? Or maybe you want to talk about your starting 11, your ideal starting 11.
Dewar was the player that I was most excited about in the off window, just because we were really, really hurting for fullbacks all last year. And I mean, just from what little I knew and read about him, I was really excited. And obviously it's still going to take time for him to adjust, but it is starting to worry me personally a little bit. Especially too with the quote that you just gave, Matt. I'm curious to see how he's going to continue progressing, if he wants to try to stick it out with the first team and just grind his way into the first team at the moment. And Mark Kannick continues to be really surprising. I mean, for someone that he has been put into the starting 11 since whenever he first came here and has not really lost that to almost anyone on a consistent basis has been really surprising too. I didn't know too much about Kijima before he was drafted, but he continues to really impress me too. I was watching your guys' show before I hopped on here, and against Miami in particular, he was really, really surprising on both sides of the ball too. I'm also curious to see, I know Blom had some knocks here and there, but I'm hoping he can get back into the side too, because like we mentioned with our center backs, at times just being those two, whenever we're caught on a counter, that's whenever Blom is, so vital to this team and being that man that can put out the fires. And He's got the pace to track back. He's got the ability to also, whenever he wins the ball, turn around and start to progress or pick out a pass. So yeah, we'll see. We're in an interesting spot right now as just a collective, aren't we?
We really are. Yeah. Yeah, I think Toykert, I just keep thinking of when I get a little depressed about where we are and I think too hard on like what's going to happen with the 10. I think it's all going to be pretty null and void once Toykert comes in, or I hope so. Like, I hope he's able to hit the ground running. And, we're no longer arguing like who plays the 10 while Alm is out. It'll just be like, well, okay, who's, what are the two strikers that are starting today, or who's the sub striker? And we're going to play this 4-4-2 or 4-2-2-2. We can argue about that. We could even argue about, are we going to play the diamond again? Maybe that makes a return after we have enough strikers. It'll be fun to see where this goes. But yeah, it's good. It's good fodder for us right now, for sure.
It's just such a long wait. I saw the tweet that you had, Matt, of whenever he could potentially be starting Toykert, and it's like, oh my God, it's only June 6th. And then I forgot about the Leagues Cup too, and I'm like, oh my God.
Well, that's a fun one. Like, Leagues Cup is kind of in our favor because it pretty much, we get those new signings in and we get the Leagues Cup. So it's like, well, shoot, play those new players every single Leagues Cup game.
That's perfect. What Santi and I were saying too, is when we started realizing the timeline, realizing that Toykert might actually come a little bit before he's able to play. If he gets his work permit and everything finished and he can train with the team, which is the big thing. After he's on vacation right now. I don't think we mentioned it earlier, but if you follow him on Instagram, he's on vacation with his family. Looks like he's having a good time. But once that's over, if he gets his work permit in, he can train ahead of July 18th. I think Leagues Cup makes sense. Like, if he's able to get time with the team 2-3 weeks. Now, I'm not saying starting necessarily the Leagues Cup games, but making the game day roster, coming in for 20-30 minutes. It's like the perfect way, based on how I assume City's going to be treating this, and what they did last year, right? Using that as the example. It's the perfect way to get him some relatively low stress but meaningful game minutes ahead of the final stretch.
It's a great point.
And Klaus could use some rest at this point, honestly.
Oh, yeah.
And another thing that was teased this week is that maybe City 2 guys get a chance. Klein scored just a few minutes ago, and that's, I think, his second or third of the season. Kuzain's gotten a few lately, including that banger the other day.
Oh, God, I saw that,
Yeah, and those guys get 2 Leagues Cup call-ups for free, and then as well as 2 regular league ones, right? So like, Leagues Cup is easy for those guys to come up, and I hope they use that. I think it would make sense. And then why am I blanking on Miki Joyner? Right?
Yeah.
Boy, that
he is playing himself. Really, he's playing himself into a lot of opportunity.
I would love to see him, any of those or all of those players, get some minutes in the Leagues Cup at the very least. I'd be a little sad. I'm rephrase that. I'd be a little sad if none of them do.
Yeah, and Carnell didn't, and not related to Leagues Cup, but just related to City 2 and those folks. Carnell did say on Thursday that in the context of the lineups we were talking about earlier, Salio, Kojima or AZ, and Indy as that next group up, if our attack struggles without Rasmus Alm, if we're just flailing over the next few games, Carnell did open the door, or leave it open, to pulling up some City 2 players. He specifically called out Caden Glover and Brendan McSorley as people down at City 2 that they're not wanting to stifle, that if their attack doesn't work in the next few games, they're not closing off that possibility. I know we've brought in Michael Wenzel on short-term loans, more on the defensive side, but that can't happen. These 4-game short-term loans, 2 appearances type of thing. And I think Carnell is just saying we might have a plan now with Salio, Kojima, and Indy or AZ, but we've struggled at times. And so if we struggle without Alm, then we're going to do what it takes. And City 2 presents options.
Any last thoughts, Carver? You don't get to be on here very often. Any pet topics you want to talk about?
No. I mean, we hit a lot of the ones that I wanted to chat about.
Good. All right, man.
Well, tell your co-host hi for us.
Yeah,
will do. Yeah, I'm sincerely a huge fan of the show, guys. You guys do a great work for the city of St. Louis and just all things soccer. And I've watched regularly. So thank you again for having me. It's always fun to chat. A team that's not near as depressing as Dortmund. So
Fair,
I'm recording with a smile on my face. Look.
Fair. I love it. Thanks so much for coming on,
Appreciate
man.
it, Carver.
Yeah, it's been fun, and we'll have to do it more often. We got you in our Discord now, so hopefully we'll be making it more regular. That's it from us, everyone. Thanks for listening this long on the wind down. Fly over footy. Everybody have a good night, a good weekend, and enjoy the game. See ya.
Go City.